You've been here before, not in memory, but in dread. A room where nothing is said, and yet everything collapses. She asks nothing, but her eyes scream the question you will not answer. You remain still not because you are cruel, but because you finally refuse to perform. It begins like this, a single silence you did not decorate with apologies. And she looked at you as if you had set the cathedral on fire. But you had only stopped lighting the candles. You were not cold. You were not harsh. You simply withheld your confession, and in that quiet, her certainty unraveled. Because when a man says nothing, he is no longer a part of her story. He becomes the shadow behind it. You are not her lover, her savior, her villain. You are the space between roles, and in that space, she meets the terrifying truth that you were never hers to interpret. You do not answer her, and in that void, something ancient begins to scream, not with voice, but with a gnawing that starts behind the eyes, a question with no language, clawing for certainty where none is offered. She was prepared for many things, rage, rejection, even betrayal. But not this, not your silence. Because your silence is not passivity. It is the refusal to collapse into the need for resolution. It is a man becoming opaque, a riddle she cannot decode. And so she must turn to herself. But she does not know how. She was taught to search the man's face for her reflection. And now you do not show her one. She cannot follow you into the silence. It terrifies her not because it is violent, but because it is indifferent. The absence of justification, the absence of explanation, that is what begins to unmake her. Because in that absence, she must choose either collapse into herself or build a new story where she is the victim of a man's withdrawal. And most choose the latter. It is more bearable to believe that you have grown cold than to realize you were never performing warmth for her in the first place. Do you understand what you've done by saying nothing? You have disarmed her weapons. She cannot guilt you because you do not offer your defense. She cannot seduce clarity from your mouth because you have closed the gates behind your eyes. You are no longer available for interpretation, and that, more than cruelty, is what shakes her. Because a man she cannot read is a man she cannot manage, and in that loss of management, she remembers something she buried long ago, the powerlessness of the soul before the unknown. But you are not the unknown, not truly. You are simply what she cannot name, and that makes you worse than a threat. It makes you a symbol, because she was raised to believe that a man must open himself to be loved, that he must reveal, confess, unravel to prove that he feels. And now here you are, feeling everything, but showing nothing. It isn't fair. It isn't part of the agreement. She wanted your longing, not your detachment. She wanted to be the center of your internal world, and instead, you have turned inward towards something else, not her, something older, something nameless. She will accuse you of being cold, not because you are, but because your silence cannot be warmed by her rituals. She will say you are withholding, punishing, passive-aggressive, anything to make your silence mean something she can fight. She cannot fight nothing. She cannot battle stillness. So she must invent a war, just to survive the peace. The truth is that your stillness evokes her greatest fear, not rejection, but irrelevance. You once believed that to love her meant revealing everything. You believed the more you opened, the more you deserved her understanding. But the more you revealed, the more you were reduced. Each vulnerability turned into leverage, each admission dissected, each sorrow recast in her image. She did not want to know you. She wanted to own the version of you she could empathize with. And when you became too whole to pity, too centered to manipulate, too silent to convert, she realized she could not reach you. and instead of honoring that mystery, she feared it. This is what they will never admit, that many women do not seek a man's truth, only his exposure. Not because they are cruel, but because they are terrified of a man who belongs to himself. A man who sits with his silence like an altar. A man who does not rush to correct her assumptions, who allows her discomfort to stretch into days, who will not trade mystery for validation. That man is not a character in her drama. He is a mirror, and she cannot bear what she sees when he does not reflect her back. You are punished for being whole, for being rooted, for not needing to be understood. Because needing to be understood is the currency of intimacy in her world. And without that need, you become foreign, untranslatable, and what cannot be translated must be attacked, or worse, mourned. She will mourn the version of you she thought she could save. She will grieve the loss of your dependence, because you have become what she cannot cradle, a man who no longer confesses. You once believed that love meant expression, that the unspoken was cowardice, and silence was cruelty. But now you know better. Silence is not cruelty, it is a boundary. It is the refusal to perform for someone who demands your transparency as tribute. It is the art of retreating into the cathedral of your own mind and lighting a candle for no one. You are not cruel. You are not absent. You are simply no longer on display. She fears the man who says nothing, not because she does not love him, but because she cannot make him prove it. She has no metric for the unmeasurable, and so she begins to shrink him into images she can hold. He's emotionally unavailable. He's afraid of commitment. He's trying to hurt me. It is easier to assign malice than to admit powerlessness. But none of those things are true. You are not playing games. You are simply done offering your soul for interpretation. This is the paradox she lives in. She wants you to be strong, but not silent. She wants you to be whole, but still need her. She wants you to lead, but not disappear. And yet your silence is leadership. Your stillness is power, not domination, but sovereignty. You have stopped narrating your existence through her expectations, and in doing so, you've become untouchable. Let them call it distance. Let them call it emotional withholding. What it truly is spiritual refusal. You are not withholding affection. You are withholding your participation in a story where your voice only exists to soothe her fear. You have chosen not to be the medicine for her uncertainty. And in doing so, you have revealed something unbearable, that the man who does not explain himself is the one she cannot make disappear. And now she sits across from you, waiting, aching, raging, not because you are gone, but because you are present in a way she cannot consume. You have become the one thing no one prepares her for, a man who listens more than he explains, watches more than he justifies, and feels more than he reveals. She cannot mark him, she cannot heal him, and most terrifying of all, she cannot know him. You are the question that will not answer itself, and that, more than cruelty, is what undoes her. She craves intimacy, yes, but only if it makes her feel central, not truth, not collision, not revelation. She wants warmth, but not the flame that scorches falsehood. She wants closeness, but only where she can still arrange the furniture. She says she wants all of you, but what she means is only the parts I can soothe, label, or hold. Only the wounds I can nurture, only the shadows that beg for light. But never the silence that refuses to beg, never the presence that does not submit, and certainly never the part of you that would dare not to need her. This is the unspoken agreement beneath most modern love. Pretend to need me in ways I can fulfill, and I will pretend to understand you in ways you do not test. Do not show me your indifference. Do not show me the self you built before me. Show me the man who trembles for my gaze, that I can love, that I can crown, that I can forgive. But the man who does not collapse under loneliness, the man who does not shrink for my comfort, the man who walks beside me like an equal shadow instead of a reflection, that man must be reshaped or rejected. She calls it connection, but it is architecture. She builds cathedrals with her fantasies and calls them relationships. She decorates you with meaning she invented in your silence. She hears your stillness and fills it with stories. She calls this empathy, but it is fear beautifully dressed, because she does not want the real you. She wants the narrative of you. She wants to be your purpose, not your witness. She wants to be your cure, not your equal. And if you offer her stillness, she will offer you doubt. If you offer her space, she will fill it with suspicion. And if you offer her a self that does not revolve around her, she will tell you that you are distant, avoidant, or cold. Not because you are, but because her mythology does not include the man who is whole. You were supposed to arrive empty, ready to be shaped, but you didn't. You came with silence instead of questions, and silence is a mirror she cannot decorate. She says she wants the truth, but the truth is a feral thing. It arrives without makeup. It smells of the forest, not the perfume counter, and it has no need to please. When you speak from that place, the raw, unyielding place, she calls you cruel, dramatic, too intense. But when you speak in pieces, when you offer palatable fragments, when you give her the wounded child or the poetic soul, then she calls it love. Because that she can hold, that she can praise, that she can say, I see you, without seeing too much. What she fears is not that you will leave. What she fears is that you will stay and not bend, that you will love her, yes, but not perform for her, that you will care for her deeply, but not place your identity in her hands, that you will laugh, dream, bleed, and ache and still remain yours. Because if you are not hers to edit, then she must confront the terrifying possibility that her love is not required for you to exist. And so the intimacy becomes theater, a shared play repeated in whispers and promises. You tell just enough truth to seem honest. She offers just enough praise to seem devoted, and both of you pretend that this is what connection is. But underneath it all, you know, you feel it. The way her eyes narrow when you speak without her permission, the way her tone shifts when you don't soften your certainty, the way her body tenses when you speak to the world more than to her. She says, be vulnerable, but she means, give me power. She says, let me in, but she means, let me name you. She says, I want to know you, but she means reveal only what I can love, without changing. And so you remain silent, not out of pride, not out of cruelty, but because you have learned that true intimacy, the kind where two sovereign souls collide without conquest, is not what she's prepared for, and it is not what she offers you. She does not want to meet your soul. She wants to decorate it, to soften it, to make it resemble the story she tells her friends about how much you've grown, about how she made you better, about how you never really understood love until her. But you did. You did understand love. That's why you stayed quiet. That's why you didn't argue. That's why you stopped explaining. Because you saw that the more you gave her, the less she saw you. And the more she praised you, the more you disappeared. Do you remember when it shifted? When her eyes stopped being curious and started measuring? When your silences were no longer holy, but threatening? When your mystery became a crime you didn't change? You simply stopped trying to be lovable in the ways she demanded. You stopped kneeling. You stopped giving her the monologues of your soul, hoping she would applaud. And instead, you became the thing she could not contain, a man who exists without being explained. And so she calls you distant, detached, unreachable, not because you are, but because she cannot summon you with her old tricks. You do not need to be rescued. You do not need her pity. You do not need her script. You are not the man who fits into her redemption arc. You are the man who lives beyond it. And for that, she will punish you. She may stay, but she will resent your stillness. She may love you, but she will resent your independence. She may desire you, but she will resent your unavailability to her projection. And slowly, quietly, she will begin to rewrite your silence into failure, into fault, into distance. She will whisper to herself that you are broken, incapable, avoidant, not because it is true, but because it is easier than facing the truth that you are simply unwilling to be transformed into her image. And you will sit with this. You will feel the sting of her distance, the coldness that comes when you do not feed the myth. And you will ask yourself, am I being unfair? Am I withholding? Am I the villain? But deep inside, you know that you are not the villain. You are simply no longer a character in her play. You are not the broken one. You are the mirror, the one who stayed silent when she needed noise, the one who stayed still when she demanded movement, the one who remained real while she tried to make you more understandable. And in that refusal, you have done the one thing no one prepares her for. You have confronted her with the limits of her own intimacy, because intimacy without freedom is just performance, and you have stopped performing. And for that, she will call you a stranger, but she will never forget you. You stopped explaining yourself, and she could no longer breathe in your presence, not because you suffocated her, but because you stopped giving her air to control. You withdrew from the ritual of justification, and something inside her began to shiver, not from cold, from exposure, because your silence is not just silence. It is a mirror with no handle. She cannot turn it. She cannot place it at a flattering angle. And worst of all, it reflects her not as she wishes to be, but as she is when no one is performing for her comfort. A man who does not need to be understood becomes a riddle she cannot solve. And so she grows suspicious of his stillness. She accuses him of secrecy, of deception, of cruelty cloaked in calm. But that is projection, the desperate projection of one who was raised to believe that love requires translation, that intimacy means access, that closeness entitles her to your process, your wounds, your sacred silence. But you did not offer it this time. You folded your hands. You looked at her not with longing, but with something deeper, detachment, not apathy, not disinterest, but freedom. And that is what burned her. You thought she wanted you whole, but she wanted you available. You thought your growth would inspire her, but your self-possession threatened her, because it meant she could no longer participate in your shaping. She could not tutor your soul anymore. She could not define you as a project, a poem, or a problem to be solved through conversation. You had outgrown the emotional stage she was directing. You were no longer dependent on the applause of her empathy, and now her kindness curdled. Her listening became interrogation. Her warmth began to cool, not suddenly, gradually, like a tide that retreats so slowly you don't notice until your feet are dry and the ocean is gone. She does not consciously punish you, but in her eyes, you have betrayed the sacred pact of modern affection, the pact that says, if I love you, you must be knowable to me. You are not anymore, perhaps not ever, and so she retreats, or worse, She tries to crack you open. She probes your silences, accuses your calm of being manipulative. She asks you questions not to understand, but to penetrate, to pry, to prove that somewhere inside you, you still need her gaze to exist. But you no longer do. You have let go of the craving to be understood. And in doing so, you have become what no one dares name: sovereign. Not above her, not beneath her, but unreachable in the way mountains are unreachable, not because they hide, but because they do not move. And in this stillness, she sees her reflection not as lover, not as partner, but as a being who has always mistaken understanding for control. It was not always like this. There was a time when you, too, believed in the mythology of shared understanding, when you thought love meant tearing open your soul and placing it into her hands, saying, "Please see me." But every time you did, she saw only what fit into her narrative. She reacted to what she could interpret and ignored what she could not name, and slowly, without malice, you disappeared beneath the interpretations, until one day you woke up and realized you were no longer there. You were a ghost performing your past self for someone else's peace of mind. So you stopped. You didn't explain it. You didn't ask for recognition. You didn't scream or threaten or cry. You simply stepped back. You watched her eyes search for meaning, and you gave her none. You let her assumptions fall unanswered. You let her questions linger. And in that space, that terrifying absence of narrative, something inside her trembled, because she realized you were no longer afraid of her misunderstanding you. And that, more than anything, broke the contract. She wanted you vulnerable, but not strong in your vulnerability. She wanted you open, but not so open that you became untouchable. She wanted you real, but only if your reality could still revolve around her interpretations. And now, here you are, real and untouched, loving her without offering yourself for dissection. She cannot name this, so she calls it detachment. She calls it cruelty. She calls it emotional abandonment. But deep down, she knows she is seeing you for the first time, and she does not know what to do with what she sees. Because what she sees is a man who no longer asks to be heard, a man who no longer performs pain to receive softness, a man who is at peace with being misunderstood. That is power beyond seduction. That is presence beyond affection, and it terrifies her, because it means your love is not a reaction. It is not a plea. It is not a need. It is a choice, and a quiet one. And in the face of that choice, she stands naked, not physically, existentially. She cannot manipulate what she cannot interpret. She cannot argue with what is not being said. She cannot win over the silence. And so she is left only with herself, her fears, her projections, her assumptions, and none of them stick to you anymore. You have become something she cannot shape, a man whose soul is no longer for sale. You may still kiss her, you may still lie beside her, you may still hold her hand as the sun sets, but something fundamental has changed. You are no longer asking for her permission to be complete. You do not offer your interiority like a gift to be judged. You have withdrawn from the marketplace of intimacy, not because you are afraid, but because you are whole. And this wholeness, this quiet, unyielding wholeness, it shines too bright for her illusions to survive. She may leave, or she may stay, confused and silent. But either way, the mirror has cracked. She has seen that your love does not originate from your need for her, and in that recognition, her power begins to fade, not because you took it, but because you stopped offering yours. And you remain, not bitter, not proud, just still. You do not chase, You do not explain. You do not clarify the misinterpretations she whispers into the silence, because the man who does not need to be understood is already free, and no one, no woman, no story, no craving can enslave him again. She touches your face one evening, not with love, but with the ache of a woman who realizes she never truly held you. Her hand trembles not from fear, but from the recognition that your silence was never a test. It was your truth. The room is quiet, not heavy, not cruel, just honest. She speaks, but her words dissolve before they reach you, because you are already elsewhere, not gone, just unclaimed. A candle flickers behind your eyes, the same one you lit when you stopped explaining. It does not go out. It does not demand to be seen. She looks at you, hoping for closure, but some mirrors never close. They only return, and long after she forgets your voice, she will still dream of the man who said nothing, and in doing so, revealed everything she could not bear to know.